Guitar Nerds podcast. I have with me Troy Engle. What I know about Troy is he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's an acoustic musician. He's a performer, a road dog, a producer, a composer, bluegrass, country, Nashville, Glen Rock, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, all over the
Everything.
place. All over the place. You've done performing, you've done writing, uh, you're doing a lot of like writing for TV now.
Yeah, I do a lot of TV music stuff. Yep, these
That's
days. Yep.
wonderful. Okay, so today what we're going to do is I want to get your story and I want to talk about acoustic stuff
Yeah,
because I don't think people, I think like everybody pays attention to the lead guitar players in Nashville.
yeah,
I know those are the ones that everybody hears about, but it's like
yeah. They're the
anyway,
rock stars, but
yeah.
there's some unsung acoustic guys in there that make those records sound the way they
R-
sound.
Right, right,
So,
right, right. So, okay, so, um, what is your first musical memories when you got? Where did it all start?
gosh,
Where did it all begin with you?
man, I think my first musical memory is my grandmother sitting in her kitchen and hearing like "Who's Cheating Who," this old country song, like coming across the radio and having some little plastic guitar that I was just goofing on. I was probably,
Hmm.
3 or 4 or something like that, but I still some reason I remember that song and just remember that music and um, you know, just always sort of enjoyed it, as a kid, just hearing it,
Yeah.
growing up with it, country music, mainly country music.
Okay. So you never went through a rock thing like a lot of kids.
No, no, I never did it. The funny thing is, getting into TV music and playing electric guitar on country things, you have to play. I have no problem playing rock. I enjoy it, and I'll
Yeah.
do some rock cuts, especially roots rockabilly stuff. So I've sort of worked my way through the rockabilly thing and into some rock stuff. I'm not a heavy metal guy. Those guys are amazing, and
Yeah.
they can
Yeah.
do their thing.
That.
I'm not as deep as each one of those guys go in their genre, but I definitely can, take a classic rock guitar solo, if I
Right,
need
right,
to.
right.
Yeah, it's fun.
So when did you first start playing guitar?
I was about 9 years old. Yeah, I took viola. They sort of coaxed me into doing viola in orchestra in school, and I did it for 1 year and hated holding that thing up. And now I play viola, so I
How did
enjoy
how
it
did you
now.
how did you pick the viola? Was it the one that
I
looked?
th- no, I think they picked me. They in music class, the music teacher, I guess, realized that there was a little bit of, whatever kids have a little bit of musical, ability. So she would recommend to the orchestra teacher, and so they s- they said, well, we've got an opening in the viola. Why don't you play viola? I was like, okay, I didn't know,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it's big and heavy for a little kid,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it's a beautiful sound. I love it. Like
Yeah,
I said, I
yeah.
love playing it now. It's fun. So,
And you do
but
play it now.
I do play now. Yeah, yeah. I play
Okay.
all the strings, all the
Yeah,
violin,
which is
viola,
amazing.
cello, and it's fun. It's mostly boredom. That's why I tell
I was
most
gonna
people
say that's amazing because
you
it's
know,
like
yeah.
one thing I will never I never say never, but the bowing instruments I'm not even gonna touch.
They are hard.
Is
I
it?
tell everybody it's sort of the worst of all worlds. You have no frets and you have this
Yeah,
bow that just doesn't make a whole lot of
yeah.
sense.
I
And
can make all kinds of screechy sounds like with the best of them, but it's
oh,
like
me too. Me too. There's days. It's like singing. Some days are good, some days are bad. But yeah, I got into that, and then I did it for a year and hated it. But I loved country music, and I got into Dwight Yoakam as about that same time, and
mhm.
Randy Travis, and I wanted to be a country singer, and every country
So you wanted to
singer,
be a singer first, and kind of like the guitar
yeah,
was okay.
yeah, because I wasn't playing an instrument, but I love singing those songs and I love those albums.
Yeah,
So I was like, well, if I'm a country singer, I got to be an acoustic guitar player because that's what you do. Everybody from Hank Senior on down, you were, strumming guitar and singing.
yeah. And this is like around the Glen Rock area,
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Pennsylvania,
Yeah, yeah.
the home of Del McCoury and
Like you said, the hometown of the McCurrys, they went to the same high school I went to,
right,
Susquehannock, and
right,
I got to know them when I was in Nashville, so it's pretty sort of a full circle kind of thing.
right,
Because
right, right.
I grew up a mile away from them, up in Styx, which is outside of Glen Rock. But
The sticks of
um,
Glen Rock, or
yeah,
yeah,
we used to drive past their house, and there'd be a bus out in the yard. My dad would laugh. He'd say, "Man, I bet somebody famous lives there," and it was. We
yeah,
had no
yeah,
idea. And I got into bluegrass, and I still didn't even know they lived there. And by the time I really got into mandolin playing, they had moved to Nashville. So it's sort
right,
of
right,
crazy. I could have got mandolin lessons from Ronnie McCurry.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So you got into churches and you some of
Yeah,
your
I did a lot of church stuff. Yeah, that was pretty much where I got started, just playing in church and with some little church gospel groups and things. And by the time I was 16, I'd played. I was playing all I got bored with acoustic, so I ended up playing mandolin and banjo and a little bit of fiddle and dobro and all those kinds of things. And
Hmm.
got in with a group called the Forbes Family, which is they were a nationally known bluegrass gospel group, and they're from like East Berlin area. And
Really?
yeah, and they were on Rebel Records, which is a big bluegrass label, and they were great singers. I mean, phenomenal. And my cousin used to go take me to some of their shows when they played churches in the area, and I made little cassette tapes up of me playing a bunch of stuff, and I gave them one. I said, hey, if you ever need somebody, or know somebody looking for a player, let me know. And they said, man, I think we could use you. So I was like 15, 16. I think I was driving, I think. So I was probably 16 and started playing with them. And the next thing I know, that was my first recording session was with them. It was for
That's
Rebel
wonderful.
Records,
And
which
that's
was a
why you're
bluegrass.
still in PA.
Well, yeah, we were in Nashville for 12 years, so we've
Yeah.
been back about 9. So, but
Okay.
yeah, there's so much great music. People don't realize there's so many
Well, I
great
didn't. I didn't.
musicians.
I've lived in York County all my life, and I didn't know that I knew. I knew the Glen Rock area and the Southern York County is like a hotbed of bluegrass. But
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you don't realize even across the country. I mean, I told people we were in Nashville. I'd do some little pickup bluegrass gigs around town, and it would be okay music. But I was like, man, I can play better bluegrass on a Saturday night and just in 5 minutes call 5 guys that are going to sound better than what's going on in Nashville, just in Glen
yeah,
Rock. It's just amazing, just in Southern York County and in York County in general. So many pro.
yeah, yeah.
Mike Munford,
I was
band
going to
player of the
say,
year. I played with him. He, years ago. He lives 5 minutes from me. We got another guy. We have like another guy plays with the Country Gentleman Tribute Band. He lives, a mile away from me here in Glen Rock. I mean, it's
yeah,
insane. Just a lot of and every genre. There's a lot of great musicians of every kind.
yeah,
In
yeah.
this area.
So, as a guitar player, who did you listen to when you were a kid? When you were coming up,
Gosh,
who were you
I
taking?
don't
Who you
know.
taking points with?
I listened to all those Randy Travis records. As far as acoustic playing and a lot of the Garth Brooks stuff coming up. The '90s were sort of acoustic guitar heaven for a lot of those things because it was all the little trilly kind of pull offs and
Hmm.
a lot of finger style and a lot of just really cool guitar parts. So I got into that. And then, of course, everybody goes through their Brent Mason phase, and I got into the Alan Jackson thing and had to
Hmm.
learn all the Brent Mason solos. Not that I learned them right, but, just
Yeah.
get into learning that stuff and
So
that
you did do a
style.
little electric.
Oh yeah, I did. I mean, I love it. I had this little Sensonics, electric guitar with a built-in speaker, so I had no idea, I had no amps or any of that kind of stuff being a bluegrass player, but I
Right.
got into it, and it was fun. I just love that style. So,
All right. All right. So now, at what point did you uh did you leave for Nashville?
well, I was playing around here sort of full time. I played bluegrass. I was mainly a mandolin player by the time I was in my, late teens, early 20s. And Mike Mumford actually got me into a band called the Mark Newton Band, and the guy was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where he was based. And we ended up recording in Nashville at Tom T and Dixie Hall's studio and playing down at the Station Inn, which is a big
I
club down in
I
Nashville.
did
And
a, I did a my claim to fame. I say this was yeah,
yeah,
is I did an open mic at the station and
yeah, no, it's
I,
cool. It's
I
it's an
got
awesome place.
I got my
Once
butt handed to me because
Nah, but it is cool. I mean,
mandolin.
that Nashville will definitely humble you in
Yeah,
a lot of ways, no
yeah,
matter
yeah.
how where you're at
Well,
in
they're
your
all kind
journey.
about it, but yeah, no. My wife says I did fine, but she yeah no,
Nah, I'm
she'd
sure
probably
they were
tell me.
very nice about it. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I got into doing that and met Tom T and Dixie Hall,
Hmm.
and Tom T was a huge country songwriter in the '70s, and
Yep.
his wife Miss Dixie was a great writer, and so they said, Miss Dixie's like, yeah, you need to move down here, and we also when I played the Station Inn with Mark Newton Band, I met Troy Lancaster, who's one of the biggest session electric guitar players in Nashville,
Okay.
and he was from Fredericksburg, where my band leader was from, and he said, my band leader introduced me to him, and he's like, man, anytime you want to come down and hang out at a session, just come on.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh my gosh, what are the chances? I'd always wanted to be a session musician. So so that's what we
So
did. We just
what do you think how much is your ability to be a good hang a part of that whole scene?
part of the session thing. That I've been listening to a lot of
Because people
podcasts.
are
I've been
inviting you. It's like if you were
Yeah, if you're not, and it was pretty cool. I was like I said, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts here again about some Nashville session guys, and it's the same thing. It's like that's pretty much 50-50. I mean, it's a given you have to be able to play, but if you're not a cool hang, people weed themselves out. If you're sort of a weird guy or a jerk, I mean, jerks just don't last too long down there unless they're just phenomenal, phenomenal musicians. But
Right.
It's very rare that you're going to run into somebody that's just a total jerk.
Who wants
because
to?
because you don't want to work with those people because you're doing something creative. So if you're a songwriter, you don't want to bum the whole vibe of the session by having this one guy who's just difficult to work with. You want to have a bunch of laid back guys that are just willing to, toss around ideas. You don't
Yeah, yeah.
want to be in a
Make the
creative
music as
space.
good as you can make it.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a creative space with somebody like that. That's just
Yeah,
a suck, of
yeah.
emotion. Yep.
So your first sessions in Nashville, they were with the bands that you went in to Nashville
Yeah,
with.
the first recordings we did, yeah, we did it at Tom T and Dixie Hall Studio. They had a great studio at their house, and we just did the whole album down there, and ended up, you know, through them after we moved down. We recorded there before we moved down, and then after we moved down, then Tom T had me down there, sort of being the house engineer and doing demos for them, and sort of, that's sort of how I honed a lot of my, playing all the instruments on a song by myself kind of stuff. I was doing that here back home, but really did so much of it that it, got me used to it.
So when did you start picking up fiddle? Which is you have my respect because that to me that's
Like I
that
say,
that
that's a toughie sometimes. Yeah,
yeah.
I tried it. Of course, I played viola, but that was, and then by the time I was maybe 14 or 15, I tried again. Uh, I had gotten a little three-quarter size from a cousin or something, and man, I tried it for like 6 months. I'm like, this is impossible. I was like, this is just not working. I was already playing mandolin, so it's the same tuning, violin and mandolin. It's the same. And I was like, this shouldn't be that hard, but man, I just couldn't get it. And I set it down. I'm just like, one of the few times I've sat something down and just said, that's not going to happen. So then I think I waited another 6 months or a year and tried it again. And then finally it started,
Did you
started to
do you
play
have any
fiddle again.
mentors in the area that you were studying with?
Yeah, I took fiddle lessons with Amy Hopkins, down at Stringed Instrument
Yeah.
Repair, down in New Freedom, and she's always great supporter. Her and Jeff Hofstetter were great
Hmm.
friends and supporters, and still are. And so I took some lessons from her, and it wasn't very long. She was, she I went and she got actually I had a three-quarter size fiddle. She ended up getting the full size, finding one for me, and just said, "Hey, I'll trade you." And she just set me up and got me going. And also, I'd say my string teacher, I did orchestra again in my 10th and I think 10th, 11th, or maybe 11th and 12th grade years in high school,
Hmm.
because I was already playing bluegrass and wanted to play more violin, and I wanted to get good technique. So I went to Kathy Yetter was our wonderful orchestra director,
Okay.
and she had great technique and was a great violinist. And so I tried to get as much good technique as I could from her because I've always been a technique guy. I mean, I think that's so crucial to playing. Why work
Hmm.
harder than you have to,
Oh
learn
yeah,
it
yeah.
the right learn it
Economy
the
of
right way.
motion.
Yeah, learn
Economy
it
of
the right
motion.
way.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want to do, but have good technique. And I knew that was crucial to fiddle. So
Yeah.
I took some lessons from her over the summer for violin, at least just getting the technique. I still can slowly read music. I'm not a great notation reader, but really wasn't worried about that. I just really was worried about getting good technique. And I went to a jam session I think before we moved to Nashville around here, and there was a violin, like an orchestra teacher who was hanging out too, and she's like, you don't look like every other fiddle player I've seen. You
Yeah.
actually have good technique. And if you watch the Nashville guys, Stuart Duncan and Aubrey Haney, all those guys, they have phenomenal technique too. So
Right. Right.
there's a lot of bluegrass guys that I mean, it's pretty common these days to have really good technique. But back in the old days, you had old, guys just sort of holding it down, on their shoulder and sawing away at it and
Yeah.
that kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
stuff. And that's sort of what, people
The
think, a lot
cliche.
of
The
times. But
cliche.
yeah, it is the cliche. But most players these days have phenomenal
Did you have any
technique.
guitar mentors?
I took my gosh, I had a guy, Jim Taylor, over in Manchester, Maryland. I took from him for about maybe a couple years, something like that. Um, and there was a guy in Shrewsbury, and my mind just went. You know how it is when you get older. You totally forget all the basic stuff. Barber's Music in Shrewsbury is where I started. He was a bluegrass guy, and I didn't like bluegrass when I started. I wanted to be Randy Travis. I didn't like bluegrass.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
know that I liked bluegrass, but I liked it. I didn't know it yet, but
Yeah.
and so I went with him for a year or so, and then went to this guy Jim Taylor out in Manchester, Maryland, and he was great. He was a left-handed guitar player, but and I wanted to learn country guitar, but he knew country guitar from the '60s. He was a Chet Atkins guy,
Okay.
and I didn't want to learn that either. But it was the best. It was the best thing ever, and I wish I could go back again and absorb more of that because he
Right.
taught me bar chords. He taught me all that
Good
kind of
chord
stuff, and some
melody
of the,
and
yeah, I mean, just
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
little Chet stuff that to me is the where the building
He's like
blocks of all
he's
that.
like the
Brent
Bach of
Mason,
country music.
well, yeah, I mean Brent Mason, all those guys. That's their man. That's who they sort of sit at the feet of,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
Chet, because he was an educated guy and just played. He had jazz sensibilities and mixed that into the country thing, and it sort of just took the country guitar playing to another level. And
Yeah, yeah.
so I was glad, years afterwards, I'm like, man, I'm really glad I had that guy for a teacher because he really put me in a spot. He gave me the stuff I needed to learn. It wasn't
Did
just
you
like
ever,
one.
did you ever consider like learning some jazz to, is that ever been a thing?
Yeah, I have over the years. I've tried. I'm a big gypsy jazz fan, so that's sort of my foray into the jazz thing. But that's sort of the redheaded stepchild of
Right,
the
right, right.
legit jazz guys. A friend of mine, Larry Wexler, up in New York, is a phenomenal jazz guitar player. So he's always trying to say, you can use this substitution, this too. And I bought the Carol Kay. I don't know if you Carol Kay, the bass player, from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Motley Crue. I bought, a friend of mine is friends with her, and he's like, man, you ought to check out some of her stuff, even not as a bass player, but just as a musician, because she had started as a guitar player. So I bought her little jazz book, and I got a couple ways through it, and it just gets so far over my head, my eyes start glazing over every time I try to do it.
Everything
But
is
I love
chord
it.
tunes.
I
Everything is.
love it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I love it, and I'm still I'm working on that these days, even because a lot of diminished stuff and things like that are not real common in bluegrass and country, but it does come up in session work, occasionally, and you have to be able to play it. You
Yeah,
can't just flub your way through it.
yeah, yeah. So
It's great knowledge.
how important was not being able to read, or like when you're in Nashville, how important was the reading? I think I know the answer, but
Right, totally, totally not important at all for any session I ever did. Once you learn the Nashville number system, which, when I was a kid was like, oh, this mysterious thing, but I knew all that. And most people who play, if you've been playing long enough, you are thinking in those terms as
yeah,
far as
yeah.
Nashville numbers. You just don't think about it. And it's such a great way to do things. I had been using my ears since I was a kid, so that was no problem.
Yeah.
Once you get used to the changes. There are some little timing things that will always throw me. Some guys will mark even in Nashville numbers. They'll mark a melody out in Nashville numbers, and they'll also mark timing out in
Hmm.
regular standard notation above the numbers, kind of thing. And I always fight with that. The timing is the hardest reading for me. Is trying to. So a lot of times it was better off just to say, "Hey man, what's the timing of that?" And they go da 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 da,
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of thing.
Sing,
Just let
sing,
them.
sing the riff for me. Yeah.
Yeah, or let them just play it for me. What's the timing? Oh, okay, and then you just use your ear to figure it out. But
So how did you get into touring? Like you started out with a touring band. I guess the touring band made it to Nashville, but
right,
um,
right, yeah, I
what
stayed
other
in that.
band?
Yeah, I stayed in that band for about 9 months after we moved to Nashville. We moved down in 2003, and then I left that band, and by the spring of 2004, it was just one of these God things. I wheeled and dealed mandolins with a guy named Charles Johnson over at the Philly Guitar Show. I used to always go to the Philly Guitar Show when we lived back home, and I still do now that we're
You
back.
say
But
Charles Johnson?
Charles Johnson, yeah, the mandolin guy, Mandolin World
Oh, okay,
Headquarters was
no,
the name
I'm
of it.
thinking
Yeah,
of somebody else.
might be a different guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he wheeled and dealed with a guy in Nashville and a great fiddle player down there. And so he told this fiddle player, he said, uh, you know, this guy's moving to Nashville. If you hear of anything, send him, uh, you know, I'll give you his info. So he did. And so I was down. It is so funny. The same day, this was, like I said, about 9 months after we moved to town. And the same day, uh, the Buddy Jewell, who was a country artist, his band leader called, and there was a band at the time called Shadazy who was pretty popular, and they
Hmm.
both called the same day and left messages. Hey, we're looking for fiddle players, and Dan Kelly was the fiddle player who recommended me for that stuff, and I really have owe a lot to him because he got me started there. And I asked my friend Troy Lancaster, I was like, "What do you think?" I got two calls, this Buddy Jewell guy and Shadazy, and he's like, "Man, Shadazy," he said, they're going to have you out in some kind of sequined outfit or something, man. Go for the Buddy Jewell gig."
Right, right, right.
So I went out for it, and I hadn't played country music. I played country here back when I was probably early 20s. There was a band in Lancaster called the Cowtones, and we played sort of 90s country
Right,
and
right.
that kind of stuff. And I played pedal steel in that band, a little bit of electric guitar and fiddle. And
Yeah.
so, but I hadn't played country in, oh my gosh, it had been probably almost 10 years, until I got that country gig. So it was a bit of the first rehearsal was a little rough, me plugging in. I hadn't played plugged in with fiddle and singing with the drums, and that everything was so much louder than I was used to playing bluegrass at the time.
Hmm.
So it took me a little while to adjust to that again. But once I did, it was fine. Went out and did that for a year, and that was a good time. And then while I was out there, I got to know Patty Loveless's fiddle player. We used to jam at our little church in close to White House, Tennessee, is where we lived. And she called one day and she said, "Are you looking for a gig?" I was like, "Well, I'm sort of ready to look for something else, move on to the next thing." I was sort of getting tired of playing in Buddy Jules' band. I mean, he was a great band leader and all
Yeah.
that. You know, I had that gig, but I was ready for something else. And she said, "Well, Patty Loveless is looking for a guy to sing harmony and play all the instruments, do what you do." And I was like,
Mm.
"Okay." So I auditioned for that and got that and did that. So that was a blast. So
Utility guy, is that what?
utility, that's what everybody calls you. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Nashville. Yeah, utility guy. Yep.
So you're in Nashville. You're just as much known as a like fiddle player, mandolin player as you are a guitar player.
Yeah, that was, every the thing about what I do is seems like everybody knows me as something different than the
Same.
other
I have
guy.
the same
Yeah,
problem.
you're probably the same way,
Yeah.
because I play steel, so I'm one guy's pedal steel guy in Nashville. I sit and do overdubs here at my home studio, and he sends me all the steel stuff, but yet he sends the fiddle stuff to somebody else. I'm like, well, actually, I feel more confident on the fiddle parts than I do on the pedal steel parts, but that's okay. It
Yeah.
takes all of it to go around.
Right.
One guy will call you for electric guitar, well, yeah, but you hired somebody else. You've got somebody else to play mandolin and banjo on it. You should have just hired me for mandolin and banjo and hired somebody else to play electric guitar.
All
It's
right.
just funny, which is cool. It's neat to be able to do that. I early on I had a hero. This guy, his name is David Johnson, and he was the guy that really made me want to be a studio musician. He down in Asheville, North Carolina,
Okay.
and he plays everything and phenomenal as far as country music. Anything with strings and a little bit of drums and piano, but pedal steel, fiddle, just phenomenal
Right.
musician. And once I saw those credits and I saw it was just his name and one other guy on the album, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And I've got to know him through the years, just a great guy. But I realized that at some point somebody's going to need something you do. So if you can sing and play every instrument, you'll stay working.
So if
So
you how much work do you have to do to keep up with that pedal steel stuff?
man, that's what I've been doing lately. I've been really back into it. I've been playing some country gigs, sort of within the couple hours of here with a couple different bands. With this guy Roy Peterman's a phenomenal steel player. I've been playing with him, and he has just inspired me to get back into it again, real hot
Huh?
and heavy. So I've been hitting it pretty hard. Lately I've been playing at least about 30 minutes or an hour a day, which you know how it is. Unfortunately, when you're making music for a living, you don't practice really as often as you used to. But I
Hmm.
sort of feel like I'm back in high school, sort of being a kid again, getting back into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been pretty fun. Yeah, but it's hard. I mean, I'm finding anymore it's tough to really juggle and progress, on a lot of things. You start going, oh man, I haven't, and I will say, like even my mandolin playing, I can do it in my sleep, but I definitely can't play as fast as I did when I was, 19 or
16.
20.
Right.
It's
Right. Right.
just
Right.
because I was doing it all the time. And I
Right.
guess if I got back into it and did it real, hot and heavy, it'd be just fine. But
Yeah.
and you know how it is. Most people probably wouldn't hear it, but you yourself, you go, oh yeah, I definitely used to play
Hmm.
it better than I am right now.
Right.
But I'm
Right.
also playing 20 other different things, so it's
Yeah.
hard to, you know.
So okay. So now, as a songwriter, when did you start the whole creative process and being known as a songwriter?
Right. I mean, I remember writing songs, when I was in like second grade or something like that. But by the time I guess I was in my teens, I mean, that's one thing that attracted me to the Randy Travis stuff and all that was the song. The songs were just so good,
The
you
stories.
know. Yeah, just amazing. And so I got into that, and I guess by the time I did a whole sort of got my own gospel project when I was playing with that Caltones band when I was 19 or 20, played all the instruments and wrote most of the songs, on that album and
Hmm.
sent it to some guys that were songwriters that had already some success in the bluegrass world. And they're like, hey, man, this is great. So that sort of made you feel good, like, okay, I'm not horrible.
Hmm.
So it's always sort of been hand in hand for me. I enjoy it. I like writing. I've always sort of been like a
That
writer.
that's
I
got to
always
be
looked at,
good. That's got to be great in your studio stuff because how to develop a song, even if you're not the main writer of the song.
yeah, and I think it helps. Like I said, I've been listening to some of these podcasts too, and they all say the same thing. And a lot of guys don't think about it, but people are like, "What's the most important thing to do when you're on a session?" And they said, "Listen to the lyrics,"
Hmm.
which most guys don't do. Even no offense, electric guitar players or whatever, they're thinking groove. And most bands I've been in are the same way. When they pick songs, they're thinking groove. Well, you've got to think about especially if I'm playing fiddle on a song and somebody says something about a fiddle or something about Kentucky or something about, something pretty and soft. You want to, play to that. You don't
Hmm.
want to just be playing whatever you think.
Yeah.
Listen to the lyrics, get something out of it, and play to that emotion they're trying to bring.
Right, 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 right. So when did you start getting into, I guess, getting into doing stuff for like television and all,
Yeah,
and how did that transpire?
that was, I think, gosh, I think it was about 2011. So we moved to Nashville in 2003, and I had sort of already come off the road playing most of my road stuff. I still did some road stuff occasionally, but it was just another equation for me doing, studio sessions in town, doing
You
overdubs.
have a family?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
that's probably a
Yeah,
lot of it.
so once we started having kids, yeah, it was time to get off the road. The last sort of road gig I had, I was out with a group called the Isaacs, who are Grand Ole Opry members, but phenomenal gospel group, and we did 160 gigs that year, and we had already had our daughter, and my son was born when I was, luckily I was home for him, but during that time, we had our second child, and it was like it's definitely time to be close to the house.
Yeah.
So I had a little studio out behind my house and did recording for other folks and things like that. But just trying to find, I've always been one of those guys. If you can find little other avenues, that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard somebody give. I heard,
Diversify.
yeah, a businessman in Tennessee was telling a friend of mine, and my friend told me, he's like, the best advice someone gave him was keep as many streams of income going at one time as you can, you know,
Yeah.
because at some point something's going to dry up, something may be going really well. You might have a couple little streams that are trickling, but at least something's trickling in.
Right.
And then if it all goes at the same time, then, you're busier than you can handle. So that's
All
just the way
right.
it goes. But I mean, don't cut yourself too thin, but always try to keep. So even now, I'm still trying to look for little, you know, YouTube channel or something like that. Little something that'll just sort of help you through.
Is
And
that hustle? That's what.
yeah, yeah, and you sort of have to do it if you want to make your living, playing music. And it's tough, but it's like any other business. But I started watching stuff with my kids, and they had some great kid shows. One was called Backyardigans, and
Oh yeah, yeah,
man,
yeah.
it's had this killer music on it. It was good stuff. It wasn't like MIDI, just little cheesy keyboard things. It
Right.
was real players and real composers composing cool stuff. And I thought that's neat.
Yeah.
And I was always an American Pickers TV show fan. I love
Same,
that with
same
any
here.
name it. So I got into them pretty hot and heavy, and I started listening to music. I was like, man, I can do that stuff all day long. It's
Right.
just little acoustic guitar riff with a little bit of dobro or something. I'm like, man, I could do that in my sleep. I would love to
Yeah.
do that. So I uh I just sort of reverse engineered the whole thing and just watched the end credits at the end of the show, and there was, music provided by Jingle Punks. Was the name of the company.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to send Jingle Punks an email, and they had a submission process, and I submitted. I had a Christmas record that I'd just done with me playing everything.
Mhm.
And of course, you have for TV music, you have to pitch something that's not, it's either public domain or something that you wrote.
Right.
So most of it was public domain Christmas instrumental stuff. I sent them that, and like 2 hours later, they're like, "Yeah, we'll take it." So,
Yeah.
so they, I was in. I was like, "Wow, that was pretty cool." A little
Yeah.
too easy, but
Yeah. I would
but
say usually it doesn't happen that way.
but it's the same thing that they didn't have anybody for anything like that. They were a young company, and they were mostly rock and roll and mostly, hip hop or
Uh,
modern EDM or production stuff
yeah.
like that. They didn't have a bluegrass guy. They didn't have that kind of. And come to find out, the owner of the company had done most of the music for American Pickers using just a little Apogee one, and he was on vacation and he bought a mandolin and played acoustic guitar, mandolin, and a bunch of things. I'm like,
Okay.
so that was pretty cool. So I think they were just glad to have, it was just
Somebody else
another,
who
it was
actually does it.
just a different niche. So I got into that and then just started sending them things, and at the same time, and the TV music thing is all about finding libraries or finding little spots that you can, you send your music to a library and then they get it placed, like 10
Yeah. Yeah.
seconds or 20 seconds or a minute or whatever. And so
Yeah.
just trying,
One of my claims to fame is one of my songs made it onto an Ozzy Osbourne, him and Jack Osbourne
TV show.
TV show. It was a
Yeah,
20
yeah,
minute thing, and it's like I get about $19 every year because of that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And they call it pennies from heaven, but that adds up. So just like
Yeah,
you do that times whatever. I've done probably about 650 cues at this point.
yeah, yeah.
So,
You do it for real. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I got into it pretty hot and heavy. There's guys that, it's like anything else. The music business has changed so much, and especially during COVID, so many musicians were like, "What can I do sitting at my house?" And they found out about TV music.
Right.
So I mean, the heyday was the '90s, like '80s and '90s. Those guys that just
Hmm.
nobody even knew that there was such a thing as TV
In
music.
industry, yeah.
And those guys were making very very good money. I'm very blessed. I mean, I make a big chunk of my living from the TV music thing, which is
That's
cool and
wonderful.
it's fun. Yeah, I'm very blessed to be able to do that. But
It's wonderful.
but it's not like the old days. I mean, there's just way too much competition, and you have sort of a race to the bottom, and then they go, well, AI is coming, so what's that going to bring? So who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
There may not be TV music for composers in another 5 years, but there'll be
They'll
another
get, yeah.
stream.
People will get sick of this the music the robots are producing someday.
Yeah, I
I
think
might
so
I
too.
might not be able to. I might not outlive that.
Right,
That's the
right,
that's the
right.
thing. But
We
whatever.
just never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's a blast, and I love. It's been a learning experience for me, and what I was especially cool about the first company I dealt with, like Jingle Punks, you could just throw anything at them. Lately I've been doing stuff for like Warner Chappell, where I'll do a whole album of a certain thing. I'll do a bluegrass Christmas thing. I'll do a rockabilly Christmas record. I'll do
Right.
nothing but Appalachian duos with just two instruments playing Appalachian music or something.
Right.
But early on, I could do anything. So I would do a Hawaiian thing. I would do a rockabilly thing. I would do a straight up old country deal or something like a Hank Senior
So
thing.
the idea. Okay. One of the key ideas is you're not a one trick pony as far as styles go.
Well, you have to be, and that's also too. I always feel like my whole career has been find a niche and fill it. That's pretty much any
Yeah.
business mantra. And so that's my thing as I try to find these little holes in libraries
Yeah.
that they're missing
So
something,
you're
or
you're
or you know,
you
yeah, or
see
here's something.
all these different styles of like um
Yeah, and what I did was I sort of specialized in genres that were very niche.
yeah.
And so I mean, like I've done gypsy jazz, a gypsy jazz Christmas record. I did a gypsy jazz record.
Hmm.
That there is some of that stuff out there, but not done in that way.
Right, right,
And I'll do, just whatever that's in my wheelhouse that I'm not going too far. I've done a Celtic Christmas CD.
right,
I've done a
right,
lot of Celtic things. I'm not a Celtic player,
right.
but I can play enough that it's convincing for a TV
Hmm.
thing. So, you know,
Okay, so the question I have, and I told you I was warning you about this, Nashville acoustic guitar players.
yeah, the unsung heroes.
Yes. So
Yep.
tell me what you know, because it's like, here's the thing.
Yeah,
We all hear about the Brett Masons of the world.
right,
All,
right.
all the heroes, all the guitar gods, all the picking like fiery electric
Yeah, the
guitar
lead, the
players.
lead guys. Yeah, yeah,
All the people I know in Nashville don't know who the guys are actually, the finger style stuff, the rhythm guitar stuff.
right, right.
So
And that's a slot where that's a slot where you have to do all that chair. And I've been
yeah, and
working
that
on
is
that too.
from what I heard, is it some of the time these guys that's what they do all day long. They specialize in this
Oh,
sometimes.
absolutely. I mean, they call them chairs in Nashville, but for every, the drum chair, the acoustic chair, the utility chair. So like if I'm going in on a session, usually at that time I was the utility guy. So I'd be playing fiddle, mandolin, banjo, dobro, any of those kinds of fringe kind of things. But then you have the electric guitar player, you have the bass player, you have the steel player, the drummer, and then you have the acoustic guy. So the acoustic guy, between the acoustic guy and utility guy, sometimes the acoustic guy is the utility guy. He usually won't play fiddle, but if there's no banjo guy on the session, he's at least got a banjo, a six-string banjo,
Yeah, yeah.
which one time I was on a session with a friend of mine, Pat McGrath, who's a killer acoustic player, so I'll mention him in a second. But on a session with him, and I've got my five-string banjo. I'm a real banjo player. I'm a bluegrass banjo player, and he's got his banjo. Well, by the time I'm getting done my fiddle part, he's like, "Hey, do you want banjo on this?" And he's putting banjo on. I'm like, "Dude, I'm sitting right here with an actual real banjo." But
Right.
it's funny. But they don't know and they don't care. But
So
um,
when you say the banjo, is that as common as the banjo?
More common so
I was
because
gonna say because
especially,
a lot of these pop kind of country things that you
yeah,
hear a banjo hook
yep.
that it's completely
Oh, most of
not
that
even not
it's
even
a
it doesn't even sound like a banjo.
no, no,
Yeah.
because that's gosh, I mean my mind is totally blanking. Who's the big Australian electric country guy?
Keith Urban.
Keith Urban. So Keith sort of started that whole banjo thing. Once he got his little Deering six-string banjo, and it's been ruining banjo players' lives the whole time. But I will say sometimes I've been on sessions that they don't want that. If you know anything about banjo, five-string banjo, you got that high drone string, and they don't want that. They want that rhythmic kind of finger style guitar thing. So it actually some of that works better on a banjo. And I probably should own one, but I just out of total, sort of thumbing
Rebellion.
my nose at it. I can't do it just as being a real banjo player, but that's
Right.
that's part of the deal. So a lot of those guys, Pat McGrath is one of the guys down there that is still playing a lot of acoustic guitar. I mean, and that's all he does. It's not that they don't play electric guitar; they can do all that, but they have specialized in that acoustic chair. And like I mentioned too, some electric guys will go play acoustic on a session from time to time, but it's a whole different world. And until you really are under the microscope, and my buddy Troy Lancaster, that session electric guitar player, plays on Blake Shelton records and everything. The first time I met him, he's like, I don't know how you acoustic guys do it. He's like, there's no effects to cover anything up. Every mistake, every little nuance is all in your fingers. And that's part of the acoustic thing is that. I mean, yeah, sure, you can play it. You think, oh, I can play acoustic, I can play a D chord, but can you play it perfectly every time, transitioning every time with
Right.
no flubs, no mistakes. All your pull offs are perfect. Your
Hmm.
tone is good. You're in time. Your tuning is good.
Yeah, I was
It
gonna
it
say
it
that.
seems it seems a lot easier than it really is. I mean, you really have to respect those acoustic guys. And one of the big guys for me in Nashville right now is Brian Sutton. I don't know if you know Brian,
Oh,
but
yeah, yeah, bluegrass,
bluegrass guy. But he is. I
bluegrass
mean,
kind of
he's
studio. He also
he's
does
doing.
studio.
Yeah, he is mainly a studio guy. That's where that's mainly what he's doing, playing on those huge hit records, and he has got it down. I mean, I've watched some of his stuff, and I know Brian. I've worked with Brian a little bit, and he is just adamant about getting everything perfect.
So a
Covering
guy
every
like Brian Sutton, is he the same kind of player that would do the fingerstyle stuff?
yes. So you have to do all of that. See, it's not like
Okay, so
he's
he's not
just
just a bluegrass
yeah.
picker.
He's not really a finger style player, but he's like me the same way. I think he uses a flat pick and fingers, and he has.
Yeah,
You have to, you're not going to be a James Taylor, but you have to be able to cop a lot of that kind of stuff. And he was like me. He had the same hero, David Johnson, who played all the instruments. So Brian came to town doing the same thing, playing utility, playing a little bit of fiddle actually as well too.
okay.
But when he gets called for a session these days, I mean, if you hear like banjo on a lot of that stuff, Brian's playing banjo because he's a decent, sort of a decent banjo player. So he's
I didn't
playing.
know.
So he's going in there, like you said, you go into there with probably 12 acoustic guitars or 12 acoustic instruments. He's rolling in with, a dreadnought, a slope shouldered kind of thing,
A
a
Nashville
little,
tuned.
yeah, yeah, a Nashville tune guitar, a 12-string guitar, a little parlor guitar,
Yeah,
um, a mandolin, an octave mandolin, a bouzouki kind of thing, a banjo, a resonator,
right.
and if you play a couple other little things too, maybe two resonators, well, maybe you need a metal body on this. If you're playing on a master session, you have to have all the tools in the toolbox.
Yeah,
It's
those are the ones. I don't want to take anything away from guys like Brett Mason, but those are the guys I
yeah.
truly respect because the other part of this is nobody knows about them.
No, and
Kind of
and the
weird.
part and the part that's really tough, it's almost, because if you're doing like a demo session, most any songwriter, 99% of the time is an acoustic guitar player. So the problem is if he comes in and he's tuned in dadgad and he's come up with this riff, you've got to become him. You've got to
Right.
tune your guitar to dadgad, which I'm not really that used to, but you have to
Yeah.
tune that and you got to learn to play like this guy because he wants that sound on
Right.
his thing. Where sometimes with the electric guitar, the songwriter or the producer might say, "Hey, I want you to play this lick," But most of the time, you don't have to execute that lick the way that guy did. So there
Right.
are times, and I've heard other guys say it, "Hey, come in here and show me what you played, and I'll try to play it." Of course, they're going to refine it,
Uh-huh.
play it better in
So
time, better in tune,
so
but
so how often you come up with a do you come up with a riff, do you think?
oh, I mean, absolutely. That's what you get paid to do as an actual session player is,
Okay.
that and that
So they got the
there.
chord changes and melody and storyline, and then you're coming up with the hooks.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really my department as much as, playing those hooks with the guitar player the guitar guy usually comes up with something. He's sort of the hook guy most of the time, but everybody can, the piano guy can come up with something too, you know, but yeah, you have to come up with these little licks and it might be just a little piece of the melody or something like that, but
Right.
that's what's making a song. A friend of mine, my friend Troy Lancaster, he played on Honky Tonk Badonkadonk, which was this big Trace Adkins
I know
song.
that one.
Yeah, he played on the demo, and he came up with the riff. He came up with the whole thing, and that song, no offense, is an okay song, but it's not phenomenal. But what made it was the riff to the whole deal. He
Right.
came up with it. He got paid for the demo. He didn't play on the record. I mean, he does play on a lot of records, but he didn't play on that one.
Did he get songwriting credit?
No, you get no songwriting credit. You got $35 at that time to play on that song. That's what he got.
That's a shame.
And it's sort of crazy, but that's the nature of the business, So
That's weird because there's like a lot of these songs are written by like 10 people.
anymore they are. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So what are your goals for the future? You're going back to Nashville? You're doing what
Yeah,
kind of goals you got?
lately, of course, since we moved back, we've been back in
So you're living in Red Line now?
No, we're in Glen Rock.
You're still in Glen Rock?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
actually in town now, so the thriving
Okay, so you're not in
metropolis of Glen
sticks
Rock.
anymore.
We're not in the sticks anymore, but we've been back since 2015. I've been doing my own band, have a band called Troy Engle Southern Skies, which is a bluegrass band, and have been writing all my own stuff and recording all my own stuff. I've done 3 albums since we've been back. Got a new album out this year on Pine Castle Records, which is a bluegrass label, and so been doing that and still continuing to do that,
Hmm.
and it's fun to do your own songs
Right.
and do that kind of thing. My wife, she was always like, "Man, you're doing writing all these songs, recording this stuff, and nobody gets to hear it except me." She's like, "You need to get out there and do it." And I think she sort of regrets it now because she's playing bass in the band, so I've made
All
drug
right.
her out, and made her play bass. So
Okay.
so I think she's regretting that. But yeah, I am also trying to get back into the Nashville thing. I think. I know a couple session guys down there that actually have moved back home to their home area. Like there's one
Uh,
guy in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Dave Cleveland, who he semi-commutes. I mean, he's down in Nashville a week or two a month.
right.
So he's sort of dividing his time. And I had gone down. We went back and visited this past year and hung out at a session. I'm like, man, it would be really fun to get to do some of that again. So I've put the word out a little bit to some friends and said, hey, if you guys get something, I'll come down. And there's always something to do in Nashville. I can do a writing appointment or something else while I'm down there, even if it's just a session or two kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So it'd be fun. We'll see.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you, Troy. Thank you for
Hey,
this. Yeah, this is wonderful.
oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. So, how can they get in touch with you? You develop other people's songs? Can you record? Can they
I do
record with
produce
you?
it. Pretty much. It's just sort of a friend recommendation kind of basis. I've got a pretty small studio, so it's just big enough for about me and one other person. And I
Yeah.
have produced stuff. I produced for a great artist here in Glen Rock, Jake Maish, who's an awesome songwriter,
Okay.
awesome singer. So I've been producing a lot of his stuff lately. Also produced stuff for Dean Crawford, another country artist down in Maryland, and so it's fun. It's mainly, like I said, just sort of word of mouth, just sort of friends kind of thing. I'm not really looking to, I don't record bands or do any of that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
It's just
You
mostly just open
develop,
clubs and
develop. Yep.
yeah, producing everything, just like Jake stuff and Dean stuff. I end up playing all the instruments on it, or we'll send stuff down to Nashville and get a Nashville guy to play drums on it, and I'll do the rest and that kind of stuff. But
Okay. That's wonderful.
yeah, it's fun.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. See you next time, guys. See ya.